of separate but equal truly been dispelled in American public schools?
I'll tackle that. I like to quote John Britton, who was a civil rights attorney that helped lead the Sheff versus O'Neill case in Connecticut that was litigated in the 1990s and has resulted in a broad regional interdistrict integration program in the Hartford metropolitan area. But he kind of argues that our current ed policy approach is really trying to make separate but equal through ed reform. And so some would say the No Child Left Behind Act is a pretty good example of that, this idea that we're going to kind of reform ourselves out of segregation, somehow trying to find the right mix of standards and curriculum to make separate schools equal. And so I think that some would argue that we're really sort of doubling down in ed policy on actually trying to make separate equal, and that in many circles, unfortunately, the pursuit of school integration has taken more of a back seat. And we could, in recent years, at the end of the Obama administration, there were certainly a number, was a big effort to try to encourage racial diversity in schools. There was the call for applications for a grant program called the Opening Doors Expanding Opportunities Program. I don't know if many of you have heard of this, but it was a call for school districts who wanted to create more diverse schools to apply to the federal government for some grants, and that would support their planning efforts and also their implementation efforts of creating more diverse schools in their districts. But as soon as the new administration came in, that program was canceled, and so we've really seen a big shift in that way.
A point I really want to make sure that we underscore is that we fully never lived out Brown 1. And I think it's important to make a distinction between Brown 1 and Brown 2, because Brown 2's implementation with all deliberate speed now becomes a significant issue. And we have to look at the series of cases from Milliken to Rodriguez that rolled back, that was a retrenchment from Brown's original goal. So that becomes an issue. But on the other hand, there is some provocative thought by folks like Derek Bell and Gloria Ladson Billings, who would argue that, hey, one, I would much rather have a fully funded Plessy than a bankrupt Brown, because we focus more on the separate, but we haven't done anything with the equal. And so even though that counter thought, that counter narrative, and I'm not saying I want to go back to Plessy, I am not saying that. So let's be clear about that. But we've never gotten Brown. We've never gotten Brown the way we were supposed to get it, right? And so what we have not fully grappled with in this country is that we have not put the educational rights of African American children at the forefront in their 14th Amendment right, the Equal Protection Clause. Even in Milliken, it was predicated on the interests of white middle-class suburban living folk. Even now today, when we think about urban school districts trying to attract middle-class, wealthy families, middle-class families back, it's predicated on the interests of the white middle class, right? And so until we get to the point where we really grapple with what Brown was intending to do, we'll continue to spin our wheels, and we'll be having the same conversation 50 years later, right? And so that's what we have to grapple with, the reality of race and racism, that this country was founded on anti-blackness. It was founded on the displacement of indigenous peoples. And until the federal courts reconciles that, we can do Band-Aids, but we'll always be in this recurring reform, but never the structural transformation that our schools really need.
Yeah, and if I could add to that a little bit, I think I fully concur with those sentiments. And I think, as you mentioned, and I want to kind of highlight one point that you mentioned, which is sort of around that 1-2 punch of San Antonio versus Rodriguez in 1973, and then Milliken versus Bradley in 1974. And so not only did Milliken say separate is okay, because the suburbs aren't really responsible and we'll leave them alone, but then the Rodriguez decision 1 year previously basically took school finance equity off the table. So you really could have separate and not in any way equal. And so in some states, and some of you probably heard the wonderful This American Life podcast, The Problem We All Live With. I see some nodding there. If you haven't, I'd encourage you to listen to it. But it talks about a suburban school system in St. Louis, the Normandy school system. It's pretty 100% black, or nearly that, and mostly almost all low income, very low tax base. And in that state, the spending for wealthy districts is 7 times higher than the lowest income districts. So it's segregated, it has very low tax base, has to tax itself at a very high rate to get minimal funding. And so we really don't even have, anywhere near equity in a very, in our current climate, in a very separate, racially separate climate as well. So I did want to highlight that point that you made.
Well, and to add to the list of cases, in the context of higher education, you had the Bakke case that really ended up gutting any kind of robust affirmative action to the extent that that would even address some of those great inequities, saying that you could not use race as a factor in admissions to address past and ongoing discrimination, that you could only use it to advance a diverse student body, generally defined, and that you could only use race as one of a number of other factors in those determinations, which then led to a lot of shifts in policy for higher education institutions that then moved to this more kind of holistic process that was not targeting past and ongoing discrimination that create the barriers to access for higher education. And there's a lot of research that shows the great benefits of diverse student body in terms of promoting cross-racial understanding, reducing prejudice, improving critical thinking skills, and in many ways, just what we have right now is it's a diluted version of affirmative action, but it allows for, at the very least, the consideration of a full identity of individuals where applicants can bring their full selves, but it's really not focused at all on racial and ethnic inequities that exist in the K-12 system. So it just becomes a Band-Aid, another one of these policies that do not address those underlying inequities and just allow the hiding of that structural inequity that in some ways higher education institutions benefit from, right? It's not in their interest to not be part of the rankings.
Stephanie is one of the Dr. Holmes said something that was good, made me think. So that 1-2 punch of Rodriguez and Milliken is so significant. I don't think we give enough attention to that. But now we are in the age where we first need equity before equality. Because equality presupposes that we're at the same level. So I'm at a 4 and you're at a 10 and we get an equal 10, well you're at a 20 and I'm at a 14, right? So now what we need is equity even before we get to the equality piece. So like, how do we think about resources being equitably distributed, right? So that don't mean, if I have a pizza that has 10 slices in it, I haven't eaten in 10 days, you just ate an hour ago, equal thing will give you 5, give me 5, but the equitable thing may be to give me 9 and to give you 1. So, but people, they grapple with the equity piece because it's been presented as a zero-sum game. So for me to have equity does not take anything from you. The notion becomes, how do we expand everybody getting to that 20, right? So how do we think about equity as a precursor to equality? That becomes so important because of that 1-2 knockout from Rodriguez and